Good afternoon, and welcome to our lecture on Martha Jefferson. The picture you're seeing right now is a picture of Martha Jefferson, but this Martha Jefferson was Martha Jefferson Randolph, the oldest daughter, the oldest surviving daughter of President Jefferson. And we'll talk more as we can about her mother, but a picture of her mother, the president's late wife, is not included because we don't have a picture of her. We don't have a portrait. There's been some later sketches of her based on physical description and perhaps a look at her daughters, but we really don't know what she looks like. And we'll try to explain that in a few minutes together as we look at the life of this very mysterious woman. Mysterious only in that our records are limited and she died so very young before she had a chance to fulfill this role of First Lady. Jefferson was married only once, and his wife was his beloved Martha Wales Skelton Jefferson. Martha was born in 1748 in Charles City County, Virginia. Her father was a very wealthy landowner and slave owner, and that's going to figure prominently into our story narrative, our historical narrative, I guess would be a better way to say it. Martha was married previously, like many of our early First Ladies. I think that Abigail Adams was the only one of the first four who was not previously married. But Martha was, where did I leave off? Martha was married to Bathurst Skelton, and he died after just a few years of marriage for reasons I cannot find. He was very wealthy and an attorney. They had at least one child together who did not survive more than about 3.5 years. But I don't know what Bathurst died from. But when he died, Martha was indeed a very eligible widow and one that could bring a lot of financial, what's the word I want to use, assets to the family. Now, what we know about Martha is based on basically what her daughter has written. She apparently had auburn hair and hazel brown eyes. She was possessed quite a musicality, owing largely probably to her affluent financial circumstances. She was apparently very vivacious and was obviously the apple of her father's eye, as she will be that of her husband's. They were married. She married Thomas Jefferson. Her husband died in 1771, and she marries Thomas Jefferson the following year in 1772. And they have quite a few children. This is a list I have, and I'm not sure it is complete. And I don't expect you to write this down. They had Martha, who was nicknamed Patsy, and she is the one who will live the longest, and the one that you're looking at in the lovely portrait in front of you. She was born in 1772 and lived to 1836. They had Randolph, a son, 1774 to 1775. They had an unnamed son, at least one unnamed son, in 1777. There was Maria, nicknamed Polly, who lived from 1778 to 1804. Lucy Elizabeth, 1780 to 81. A second Lucy Elizabeth, 1782 to 1785. And then our Martha, the mother herself, died in 1782, probably related to health issues arising from the fact we believe she had diabetes and then had all of these pregnancies. That was not unusual. As you and I have talked about before, the infant mortality rates were very high in this day, and still very heartbreaking with each loss, but they weren't, unfortunately, unusual. And diabetes wouldn't have been able to have been managed the way it is today, so that would certainly take a dramatic toll on any woman's health as she's going through pregnancy. We believe that she may have suffered from postpartum, what do they call that? Very serious depression and emotional, and I'll explain why we might believe that, and emotional distress. So looking at all those pregnancies in that short period of time is very dramatic and would certainly take a toll on anyone's health, particularly anyone who's suffering from some kind of long-standing health difficulty that we believe she had. Some historians believe, and I think there's a good argument for this, that Thomas Jefferson would never have become President of the United States had Martha lived, and I'll explain why. Whenever he was called away during the early years of the American Revolution, whenever he was called away from home, she would not write to him. He wrote to her constantly. If he was in Philadelphia or any of these other locations, she would not return to his letters because she was so angry with him about being separated from her, and she just did not accept it. And that took a toll on him personally. By all accounts, he loved her very deeply and was constantly torn on whether to be serving his country in this way or back home with her. And in fact, he will have to return to Virginia. He serves as governor of Virginia during the midst of the war and will have to return to Virginia to whisk his family away in the face of British occupation of the area in which they lived. So here's a man who's torn between country and family. And Jefferson, I'm never very kind in my discussions of Jefferson. He certainly is a mixed bag of morals and amorality, agnosticism at the very least, and just some very difficult situations. He was a man who stood for personal liberty of the individual in the eyes of the Enlightenment, great Enlightenment ideas, and yet he owned hundreds of slaves that because of his financial debt, he would not sell. He was a man who loved learning and was very, very proud of his role in the establishment of higher education in Virginia, yet a man who rejected the reality of the deity of Christ Jesus. So here's a man who is a mixed bag, and it shows in his personal life. And as I say, he loved his wife very, very dearly, loved the two daughters that lived to adulthood, particularly fond of his oldest, Patsy. I do want to mention, in fact, I just stumbled on a book of letters between the two of them, and I think it's going in my Amazon cart so that I can buy that sooner rather than later. I'd really very much like to see those. But we do not have any letters between him and Martha, and owing partly, of course, the fact that when he was away, she wouldn't write to him, but also he was a husband, and we'll see this again with Teddy Roosevelt, that with the death of his wife, the way that he managed his emotions and dealt with her passing was to destroy any remembrances, physical remembrances that he had of her. If there were any letters that were extant, he destroyed them. If there were any pictures, or anytime you see a painting or a picture and it's supposed to be Martha Jefferson, his wife, that's not so. It is done much later. If that is supposed to be her, we have nothing that was done at the time of her walk on this earth. We have nothing left. There is, I think, a silhouette that may exist out there that is believed to maybe have been her. Silhouettes were very popular at this time, and I know you know what I'm talking about, these black shadow pictures of someone, but even that's a little guesswork. So history has closed the door on our understanding of some of the aspects of their relationship, and on just her personality, beyond the fact that we know that she was a musician and that she was well educated, again owing to the affluence of her father. I think the larger story is the one that remains open and is becoming increasingly revealed to those who are interested not only in history but in ancestry. And that I think technology today has opened up quite a bit of that story. Jefferson had a romantic sexual relationship with a young woman named Sally Hemings, and I'm sure you've heard of this. I remember when this story was just kind of getting well known, but there's more to it even than meets the eye. Sally Hemings was to use a word that we don't hear much anymore, she was considered a mulatto, and that was someone who obviously had a white parent and a black parent. And Sally was an, uh, I don't want to use the wrong word. She was a personal slave to his wife Martha, but she was actually much more than that. Sally Hemings was born to the concubine slave of Martha Jefferson's father. So what that means for purposes of our understanding is that Sally Hemings and Martha Jefferson were half sisters, and there is some speculation that they resembled one another. So I have wondered, since I have known that, I have wondered if perhaps Jefferson became involved with her after the death of his wife because she maybe looked like his wife. So there's all kind of speculation as to why he never remarried. It may have been something that Martha insisted on. Her father had been, after the death of her own mother, her father had been married at least twice, maybe 3 times to other women. And those relationships were never successful in terms of daughter and stepmother. So it could have been that Martha did not want that for her children. I'm not sure. Um, but it is, I don't, sordid comes to mind. Sordid is an adjective that comes to mind. But there has been a bountiful supply of descendants who have no doubt enriched the world. If you do a Google search on Sally Hemings' children with Jefferson, you're going to find um, just a treasure trove of pictures and stories that the new DNA testing has been able to unearth for us. So we have a glimpse into Jefferson's family uh, through Martha's, I'll call her sister, even though she was a half sister. So there's a lot of interesting stories there, and those people have no doubt blessed this earth with their contributions to humanity, and that they continue the Jefferson line, maybe through a side door. But Martha remains one of those that we'll never know. We'll never know anything about her beyond this very scant historical record. There's a lot of interesting things. If you want to write in your book, or I'm sorry, in your notebook assignment, if you want to write on the Jefferson side of things, you certainly may. You may write about Patsy, whose own stories and her own First Lady duties. She will do some of that, and she had 11 children too. She will help her father, and Dolly Madison will help Thomas Jefferson as a bachelor president. So you might look at Patsy if you want. I think she's a lovely person and a lovely character. Um, Certainly someone who doted on her father and did her best to help him in every way that she could. So that's a very interesting possibility for you, and I would certainly accept that if you want to look at her life. And I'd like to think that that would please Martha Jefferson, the wife and mother herself, that her daughter would be featured in your research. So this will be a short and sweet lecture today, but I wanted you to have a little bit of information on Martha Jefferson, even though we don't know much. And while I'm uncomfortable, while I am uncomfortable in telling you this very, problematic story about Sally Hemings, it is nevertheless interesting, and it is part of our American heritage, and it gives us some insight into a very difficult personality of Thomas Jefferson. I believe, and this is not a lecture on presidents, you'll have that with Dr. Justice, but Jefferson had a very large but also very fragile ego. And Adams, during their friendship, I think had some trouble with it, as we alluded to, but managed to be deferential, even though they had some arguments that almost severed their relationship for good. But Jefferson, I think, was a difficult man, and he had difficulty with Alexander Hamilton, some difficulties with Jefferson. He had the inspirational quality of rallying a political party around his beliefs, and which will morph eventually into, under the leadership of Andrew Jackson, speaking of difficult, into what we believe to be sort of the foundation of the modern Democratic Party. So Jefferson's an interesting character, an interesting bird, very intellectual, very much involved with his wife. I don't believe emotionally. I don't believe that the relationship between himself and Sally Hemings began before Martha's passing. So, and I think the historical record will support that. So anyway, you do your research if you're interested in this line. Do your research and see what you can find. And I appreciate you listening through this very short little lecture. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to talk about none other than probably the most popular and well-known of all of America's first ladies, our beloved Dolly Madison. And I will tell you, as we're preparing for this, that many years ago I had a student who wrote her capstone on Dolly Madison. And it was just lovely, but I mean, how could it be anything else? I think you will love Dolly, and as I do, and as my students have over the years. And also, I want you to think generously and kindly about Martha. If Providence had allowed her to live on this earth longer, she may not have been First Lady, but she may have changed and may have allowed her husband to pursue a political career. We don't know. But I do believe they had a successful marriage. And I believe that uh, it, it's entirely possible that had he not faced the pain of this loss, that his religious leanings may have been different. That's just up for speculation. But we'll see. But thank you for your attention, and I'll look forward to talking with you tomorrow about Dolly, and I hope you have fun looking into this intriguing and mysterious life. Thank you, and I'll see you.